We are live. Welcome to this week's episode of MicroConf On Air. As always, I'm your host, Rob Walling. Every other Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. My clock is on my laptop is still on Pacific. I looked up because I'm in Minneapolis. I'm so confused. Every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, we live stream for 30 minutes. We cover topics related to building and growing ambitious SaaS startups, bring us freedom and purpose, and allow us to value and maintain healthy relationships. We don't ask for permission to start companies. We build and ship real products that sell to real customers who pay us real money. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us this week. Hopefully I saw you last week, or perhaps you saw me at MicroConf Remote. Had a great time putting that together, and went off pretty successfully. To be honest, throwing our second virtual event, I think we took a lot of learnings from MicroConf Remote 1.0 back last September. And the reviews are coming in quite positive about MicroConf Remote 2.0. If you head to microconfremote.com, and if you didn't buy a ticket and didn't get the videos, you can head to microconfremote.com and pick up a video pack. And I think in the next few weeks, we will be releasing those. I'm excited about today's guest. We're going to be talking about building communities that enhance user satisfaction. My guest is Rosie Sherry. She's at Rosie Sherry on Twitter. She is the former community manager for Indie Hackers. She is currently building Roiseland, which is a newsletter community and course for community builders. And she is the community lead for Orbit, which is software, it's SaaS, that their H1 is build relationships, not spreadsheets. Grow your community and provide ROI with Orbit, the community experience platform that puts members first. So it looks across the internet at a bunch of different community sources, and it can pull data in and show you engagement and talk about what they're up to. So today we're going to be talking about a pretty tricky topic in my experience: building, growing communities, and keeping people happy. And with that, I'd love to welcome Rosie Sherry to the show. How's it going?
Hey, Rob. Thanks. It's good. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here on the show. So I think I want to start. If you're watching this live, please submit questions in the MicroConf On Air channel and Connect, and producer Xander will feed those to me. The best part of doing a live stream, of course, is that we can take questions from the audience. So I think I want to start, Rosie, with it's a question. It's around building community for SaaS companies, because it's one thing to think about Indie Hackers, which is a community, and that's the point of the entire site. It's another thing to think, I'm running a SaaS app. Let's say I run an email service provider, or I run a web page builder for SaaS companies. Is there a need for me to build a community around an app like that? Is there a reason for me to build a community of my users and my customers in that case?
I would say it depends, but there's good reason to, if I guess you have enough people and enough interest. I guess I would also say it's like, it depends like what you want to get out of the whole situation and what your members can get out of it. And I guess if I think about like where I am right now, like Orbit, where I'm at the moment, they have a Discord community that they started recently. So that's like definitely a community. And they're using it very much to engage with the early users and early customers. And there's a lot going on there, a lot of feedback, a lot of bugs. Discussions going on as well. So, I guess, a lot of it comes down to like, what value can you bring to the conversation or to the people, rather than thinking about, let's start a community. I think there has to be a good reason to like pull people in.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask is, so let's say that I do decide, because I've built multiple communities now. I've built a few that are online, and I've built the in-person community, and now MicroConf, which is in-person and virtual. So I'm familiar with, there's a lot of challenges to it, and there's a lot to manage, but there's a lot of pluses, a lot of pros that come along with doing it. And I think you touched on a few there, is that, because if I just want feedback from users, I can ask for support. I could ask people to email, right? Give us feedback. Here's a form. Here's an email. But how is getting feedback in a community setting, how is it better than just direct one-on-one connection you might do in an intercom widget or via, a response to an email?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the situation, but I guess when things are open, when other people can see what's going on, I think it's like really useful to have that. Like people come together and they share ideas, for example, they share problems, and um, hopefully it can also like reduce like support type queries as well if other people are seeing that others are having challenges, or it doesn't even have to be around challenges. It can be around successes or sharing tips. I think is another good one with SaaS is like if you can use a tool in various different ways, it's really useful to be able to see what other people are doing and how they're doing it, and to be able to encourage people to do that, I think can really kind of feed back into the whole loop of building a SaaS. And often I think features can arise from it, problems can arise from it. So I know like at Orbit, they're really good at just, jumping on feedback requests and bug reports and just like fixing things really quickly. And that builds a real sense of trust in the company, in the product.
Got it. And if let's say I'm a single bootstrapped founder and I'm trying to build an app, launch, market it, do sales, have you seen anyone in that situation be able to kind of launch and manage a community? Or have you been more familiar where it's a small team and there's at least someone who can maybe be half dedicated to helping, nurture and encourage and moderate that community?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know. I would think so. I would like to think so. But I've definitely seen like a lot of communities fail like that as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's the challenge. Is like, when do you start, and like how do you start, and what tool do you use, and how do you make it as least frictional as possible, or how do you make it so that there's like a motivation for people to show up, and that's like I think the biggest challenge for any kind of community. I think most people probably start it too soon, and you probably want to start thinking about community when people are emailing you too much and you can't handle all the emails. And at a point like that, that's probably when you want to start thinking about building a community around the product, because then it will be easier to kind of have that initial traction and not have the deadness of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you have a little bit of critical mass, because a community with 5 people interacting it just looks like it's completely dead. We have a couple questions coming in from audience members. Pablo asks, I want to build a community, but I feel there are already so many communities out there targeting the same audience. It feels saturated. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem at the moment. Since COVID, like communities has just like exploded as communities that exist, and community software is just like it's just crazy. I remember just like looking back a couple of years ago when I started at Indie Hackers, it was a completely different world then.
Sure.
So I think there's a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon of communities, and these days I kind of look at it as just like you wouldn't build a SaaS product because you want to. You shouldn't build a community because you want to. You should do like the research. You should, go out there, have conversations with people, and kind of validate whether there's an actual need for a community. And that process doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It takes time to research. It takes time to kind of build trust and relationships. But the more you do that, the more answers and information you get to validate and give you confidence on whether or not it's the right decision. But I would also add that you can create really small communities as well, and I think that there's so much power in small communities that people don't really give enough credit for.
Yeah, I was going to
So
chime in with that of like the thought of niching down, niching or niching down a little bit. Certainly every niche possible is not saturated. And if I were to say, I'm going to start a community for aspiring entrepreneurs, it's like, good God, that's massive. And there's already a bazillion of them. But how do you say maybe aspiring entrepreneurs who want to put their stuff on Etsy, or aspiring entrepreneurs who are into specifically using, knitting, crocheting, yarn type stuff? You can tell I'm a real expert in that topic, but who want to do that and put it on, Etsy, eBay, Amazon, or whatever. Like there's ways to think about that, and targeting, let's say, SaaS founders is probably too broad these days, because it's, there's MicroConf, there's SaaStr, there's whoever else is doing it. I think there's, you may have to start with a niche angle, to piggyback on your point of even a small community, a vibrant community of 100 people who are participating, can still work.
yeah, and I've actually done that recently with Indie Woman. So I kind of, I guess, like a side project thing, but I also did it kind of for the benefit of indie hackers. And I felt there was a need, and I saw like over the time that I was indie hackers, that like that there should be a space separate for indie women. So after like a bit of nagging and people like kind of requesting it and hosting a few kind of small scale events, we ended up creating a community around that. And it's, it's small, it's like 150 people. But we meet up like every couple of weeks for accountability sessions. We have a Slack, we have an email list that's on indie hackers. And it's great. I've probably made better friendships from that in the past 4 months than I have actually on indie hackers. So it's there's definite value there, and I think something like that's been going about 6 months. If you just like keep at it, it can grow and it can turn into other things.
Yeah, and I would add to the answer to Pablo's question, of niching down and targeting the same group of people. The other thing I would say is build an audience first, then a community, right? Audience and community are not the same thing. Because I'll give you an example of how there's different. If I start a podcast or if I start a blog and I have 10,000 readers or 10,000 listeners, but none of them talk to or know each other, it's not a community, it's an audience, right? And that is exactly how MicroConf started. And that is how, frankly, MicroConf Connect started. Like I built an audience first by writing essays and then writing a book and then doing a podcast. None of those people really interacted until that moment of, hey, let's all get together online, in what was the predecessor essentially to MicroConf Connect, and let's get together in person at the first in-person event. Without the audience, the community would never have had the, what do you call it? It's like the critical mass. It just, we would have sold 5 tickets to an event, or we would have had 20 people in some dead forums, to your point. There's another question. It's about the decision to use Discord. What went into the decision of using Discord, pros and cons? I'm actually really curious to hear this, because I don't use Discord, and my son does. He's 14. And so I'm thinking about, signing up for an account and starting to use it. But I haven't heard many. It started as a gamer, a tool in the gaming space. And I haven't heard many B2B apps use it as a community. And so I'm really curious to hear your thought process there.
Yeah, so it wasn't my decision. So I'm very new to Discord. I'm very similar to you as well with Discord. Until I was on a couple of Discords, but I never really Discord communities, but I never really checked them, because I only use Discord to chat to my teenage sons. So very very similar situation. But I've been forced over with Orbit. But yeah, it's growing on me, I have to say. I think it's got more community focused features. It's got a lot more flexibility. It's got things like moderation. It's got like the drop-in voice channel, which is interesting. And we're actually going to soon start a podcast on Discord. We'll record it separately, probably. But the idea of like using Discord as a way to engage the community and have people come in and ask questions and we can do that on Discord, but record it like separately with Zencaster or something like that. So we have plans to do that. And yeah, generally it's just like, I think it has a lot more flexibility, but I didn't set it up, so I'm still like learning all the quirks from it. But so far, I'm enjoying it. There's a blog post they actually wrote about it. I can link to it afterwards. They kind of wrote about the whole. They were on Slack before, and they migrated to Discord.
To Discord. What are there any cons and any negatives that you've experienced with it?
I think that for me at the moment, the only con is just like getting used to it. But and threading is a bit weird. Yeah, it's a learning curve, and threads are a bit weird. I still love Slack. I'll be honest. I still love Slack. So it's just that that mindset change of switching over.
I'd imagine in B2B context, everyone I know uses Slack and they all know how to use it and they all have it on their phone. I say all, 99% of the founders I know have it. And I don't know what, just because I don't use Discord, I don't want to paint the broad brush of like none of the founders use it, because I know that some of them do. In fact, Justin Jackson just chimed in and said, Discord is the only way I can chat with my 15-year-old. And that's probably going to be true for me within 12 months. But I would guess that a lot fewer B2B SaaS founders have ever used it, have an account. It's just a little bit of friction, right? When I see a Slack group, I either think, I already have 7 Slack logins or 10 Slack logins, to different channels. It's not, if I want to be part of it, it's not such a big deal. But Discord would be perhaps a bit of, like you said, a learning curve, maybe a little barrier. Spencer chimed in. He said, Discord is great. It's definitely expanding out of the gamer niche. Yeah, absolutely. It has been for years. I think it's still, like if you go to the homepage, it still looks pretty gamery. He says, I'm in various communities for developers on Discord, which I could totally see, right? There's huge overlap with developers and gamers. So that's really interesting. So then I want to, obviously if you're still in, or if you're in MicroConf Connect, please do ask questions. But I want to ask, when you're moderating or you're participating in these communities, I think of 2 functions of someone running a community like this. One is moderation. It's to keep people on track, on topic, not arguing, in the right, channel for the right for the right conversation. Threading in Slack, there's all these things that producer Xander and Tracy help with moderation in MicroConf. There's that bucket of it, moderation, and then the second bucket I think is getting people to engage. It's in MicroConf, it might be the Friday fun question, or it's just a question like, hey, what are you working on this week? Or, I see that as different perhaps than moderation. Do you hold a similar mental model? Am I missing pieces?
Yeah, I guess, those would be the 2 main buckets. I guess maybe the other angle would be, I guess, a bit more leadership kind of stuff, is like setting the tone for where the community is heading and what you want out of it. But, that could come into the engagement side as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you set the tone? You personally, you've obviously done this at multiple companies now. I mean, how do you think about setting the tone?
It's tough. I think the tone has to be very much aligned with where you want to see the company heading. So I guess like my three experiences that I've had is like Ministry of Testing, Indie Hackers, and now Orbit, and they all have their own quirks, their own goals, their own missions that they want to head towards. When I was doing Ministry of Testing, I was very much focused on changing the testing industry. So everything I did, I wanted it to be aligned with that, to help me like every day kind of nudge me towards that goal somehow. And that resulted in kind of trying to be fun, but trying to focus on new things, kind of trends, and trying to, as much as possible, like ditch all the old school kind of stuff. So I did my best not to kind of bring up topics that were kind of corporate-y and old school. So and that naturally kind of drove everything I did, not just in the forum, but like the conferences we organized. I wanted to ensure that all the topics were relevant, and that kind of stuff. And I guess the same with Indie Hackers. Indie Hackers was all about trying to create more indie hackers and how educate indie hackers, and it's kind of evolved, like I guess over the couple of years that I was there, but it's very much focused on how can we share stories that indie hackers doing indie hacking, and trying to get to the root of it, and I guess sharing trends and news alongside of that was very much a goal.
That makes sense. And I mean, something that obviously doesn't come up all the time, but certainly from time to time is the problem user. Maybe they're a troll, or maybe they're just a negative person, or maybe they just don't necessarily interact with others in the way that we, you would deem respectful and such. When I don't mean one-off arguments, right? Because I'll see conversations get heated, and I'll know two of the participants and be like, these are people that are not normally like this, and let's assume that if it's a one-off, that's not what we're talking about. But how have you dealt with folks who come in and just feel like they're kind of trying to stir up trouble, on a regular basis? How do you deal with them? Because it's not always black and white, right? That's the problem. Is if they just come in and start spouting, really hateful stuff, you just ban them. But there's often these folks are pretty skilled at walking this tightrope line, such that you can't just ban them outright, but they're saying maybe negative things a lot. What's been your experience dealing with those types of folks?
Yeah, interesting. I've had a few interesting experiences. Overall, I haven't had too many bad experiences. I know that when I took on the role at Indie Hackers, I was kind of worried about those kind of things, but actually we rarely have those issues, and the types of problems we get are more like pure spam kind of stuff that you can just hit delete. But there's definitely people over time that just take up so much energy in the room, and I think sometimes you just have to, personally, my preference now is just to cut ties early. It's so much less stressful for people, for the team especially. And I've seen situations where people try to go through the process of 1 ban, 2 bans, 3 bans, and you're out and kind of stuff. And it's just it's tedious, it's stressful, and it's just not my style. So, and the longer these people hang around, the longer it impacts your community. So really, you want to
toxic, right?
Get them out. Yeah.
That's the thing is it's not employment law where they can come back. I mean, they could, but they're not going to. I don't want to say not. It's unlikely they're going to come back and sue you for wrongful termination. They wrongfully blocked my account. It's like if someone's a jerk, your end user license agreement, your terms of service probably says you can do this, and they have no repercussion, right? And I agree with the 1, 2, 3 bans. It can drag out for weeks and not only take your and your team's energy, but drag the community down as well.
There's a term that I came across recently that I kind of like, and it's called "We don't do that here." So I try to use that as much as possible, and it's kind of saying you're welcome to do what you like, just don't do it here. Go somewhere else and do it, right? We're not telling you how to live your life, but that's just not how we live here or how we behave. And there's other analogy perhaps of thinking of it like your own home. It's like this is your home that you're inviting people into, and it's not right that people come into your home and do what they like.
Right. We have another question from the audience saying, are you worried about what's going on with Facebook and Section 230? Could it kill the small online communities? Are you familiar with what's going on there?
I'm familiar, but I've lost track out of sheer dislike for rules and regulations.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I kind of I won't comment on that one because I don't feel like I'm well versed on that.
and I know we face this within MicroConf, and I can imagine if I was running a SaaS community or a community of my users, if I was a SaaS app, you're going to have users who are at the early stages. They're just getting onboarded. They don't really know much about what they're doing yet, and they have questions and they have needs. And then there's going to be folks who are veteran users, right? And there's people in between. And so with MicroConf, you might think of it as like the starter audience versus the growth audience, and then the people in between. How can you cater in a community to both or all of those kind of segments, different people, different expectations at different learning stages, different knowledge stages?
Yeah, it's tough. It's definitely one of the challenges we had at Indie Hackers. It's like people would come in and they would hang around for a while, and then once they kind of felt confident enough, it was really hard to like keep them engaged and keep them coming back. I used to like to think of the podcast as something that would keep the more experienced people coming back, and I think that's probably what it's more about. Is like when people first join, they're new, they're excited, they're keen to learn. But then as people kind of rise up in the community, become more experienced, you have to create different experiences for them and cater to what they need. So it could be like speaking gigs or podcast invites or creating something together. And that's tough, I think, as a community, because that takes a lot of effort. It's more effort than, in my opinion, running a forum. It becomes a lot of content production. And that's not easy to keep that flywheel flowing.
Right. Yeah, I don't usually think, I think one of the things people, when they evaluate communities or think about starting a community, I don't think it's on the radar of like, I'm going to start a community and I'm going to moderate it and nurture it, and I'm going to create a bunch of content. Like those two things are kind of separate, separate in most people's minds. But I can imagine that at scale, that becomes more of an issue probably.
Definitely becomes core to it. Yeah.
Yeah. What types, as we wrap up, because I think we just have 1 or 2 minutes left. Is there, when you, as you're building up this Orbit community, what's your mental model of how do I engage people and get them to engage? Because that's often what, even if I had 50 people in a community or 100 people, if they're not engaging, then that's a problem, right? So how can you encourage people on a regular basis to participate and give back such that you're not, as the moderator, the only person who's answering all the questions, right? Or the only person who's getting people to engage?
Yeah. Bearing in mind that I've only been there 3 days, but the general loose plan is to follow the lead of what the founders want. So I'm very much taking the lead in things that they want to do at the moment. But alongside that, it's kind of what I call is like studying your people. It's like you don't want to jump in straight away thinking you know what you're doing. You want to like start dipping your toes in, kind of figuring out what they're talking about, and then hopefully creating like experiences or content or conversations that really kind of relate to them. So at the moment, I'm very cautious about kind of jumping in too quickly doing stuff. But I'm definitely looking towards pulling people in the way that the founders want me to.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Rosie Sherry, we are at time for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If folks want to keep up with you, they can head to Rosie Sherry on Twitter or Rosie.land to see the community you're building, which is a newsletter, community, and course for community builders. Thanks again for joining me on MicroConf On Air.
Thank you, Rob.
All right, as we roll out, thank you again to Rosie. I already talked about MicroConf Remote at the top. Get access to video recordings at microconfremote.com. Thank you, as always, to our headline partners in 2021, Hey and Stripe. Please thank them on Twitter at HeyHey and at Stripe. And if you haven't already, head to youtube.com/microconf and hit the subscribe button to get notified of all of our videos. I'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Same time, same place.